I decided as a relatively new member of the Baha'i Faith, just last April, as a matter of fact, that I wanted to do a series of talks, assuming that I have a chance to get welcomed back to do another talk, about attributes of God. And the first one I wanted to talk about was the one that I always think of first when I think of God, and that's the attribute of the fashioner. Although I didn't know that word before I joined up with the Baha'is, I'd never heard it before. Basically what it's about is how to create what you really want to create. And that's what I'm going to be talking about with you this evening. So in terms of attributes of God, according to the words of the Old Testament, says Abdul Baha, one of the major promulgators of the Baha'i Faith, God has said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." It's an idea that appears in many of the world's religions. This indicates that the perfections of God, the divine virtues, are reflected or revealed in the human reality. The qualities and attributes of divinity are radiated from the depths of a pure human heart. Now, as creatures in the physical universe, we share many attributes of other parts of that universe, starting with the minerals. Minerals have the attribute, we're told, that they have cohesion. They can hold together. With luck, we can do the same thing. We also have the characteristics of the vegetable kingdom. Augmentation, possibility for growth, not only physically, but also mentally and spiritually. We have the same capacities that the animals have for sensation and perception and the ability to take action based on those actions. But as human beings, we have something else, something special. We partake of all of those characteristics, and God is in all of those. But we also have our own special characteristics. The virtues and attributes pertaining to God are all evident and manifest, says Baha'u'llah, the prophet, founder of the Baha'i Faith. Among them are trustworthiness, truthfulness, purity of heart while communing with God, forbearance. There's a list on the wall in there when we do our children's classes of the gifts of character, the virtues. That's rather long. But when I looked at that list, I was concerned because the one I was most interested in wasn't there. At least I didn't see it there. Because when I thought of God, what I always thought of was first and foremost, God is a creator. Many people start their search for God intellectually with the notion that how could this complex, amazing universe exist without an intelligence to have created it? Well, if God's a creator, the question is, do we have that attribute also? Do we actually have the capacity to create, to bring things into being from nothing? Baha'u'llah says, every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God is endowed with such potency as can instill new life into every human frame. Through the mere revelation of the word fashioner, issuing forth from his lips and proclaiming his attributes, this attribute to mankind, such power is released as can generate, through successive ages, all the manifest arts which the hands of man can produce. Roger Coe helped me find this reference to fashioning. Well, it sounds like creating, but it also sounds kind of like messing things around. And if creating is really bringing something into being, like bringing a universe into being, do we have the capacity to do that? I asked Roger for another reference, and he found me one. O my servant, obey me, and I shall make thee like unto myself. I say, be, and it is. And thou shalt say, be, and it shall be. That's an amazing promise. And sometimes it works exactly that way. Sometimes I think about what I want, and I think, yeah, I think I know what I want, and it happens. Occasionally, we're able to do that. Say be, and it shall be. Think of a time. Sometime when you wanted something, and you got it. Maybe this morning, you got out of bed, you were wearing your night clothes or whatever you wear to sleep, and you thought, I'd like to be dressed. And lo and behold, here you are, not in your night clothes. You decided you wanted to come to the center. You started out somewhere else. You're here. Think about a time when you wanted something, and you actually have it now in your life. You didn't have it before, and now you do. Please tell somebody about that experience. What did you want? What did you do? And how do you feel? How did you feel when you got what you wanted? Just turn to somebody nearby and talk about a time like that, please. Could be something big, could be something little. So let's hear an example. What's something somebody wanted that you got? Yeah.
I got my wife.
Oh.
Went after my wife, and I got her.
Went after his wife and he got her, and I've heard the story, and it's almost as miraculous as what I just showed you. It's quite amazing. Terrific example. And how did you feel when you got her?
Oh, gosh, relief.
Outstanding. Let's hear another example. Yeah.
I had my house for sale for almost a year, and I said, okay, God, you evidently want me here, it's all yours. The house sold in 24 hours.
Phenomenal.
Just out of nowhere.
Just out of nowhere. Okay. That's what we're talking about. See, it's easy to assume that we don't have the capacity to do that, but in fact we do. What's an example that you have? Eugene? Yeah.
Probably I can also example, but I'm sure that they will appreciate it. Really, I ask sometimes what I want, and I get it. I really want it. So, but you have this capacity to really want it. I cannot tell.
Indeed. Okay. So we all have examples of times that this happens. So sometimes it works that way. We want something, we get it. Sometimes quite remarkably, just all of a sudden, out of nowhere. On the other hand, sometimes it doesn't work so well. Like, as you said, in the stock market, for you in the recent past, hasn't been working so well. Any of you who've ever tried to keep a house clean, especially if you have little kids, you may have felt that cleanliness is next to impossible. Even in famous families, the Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, had a brother, Yahya, a half-brother, who very much wanted to be the leader of the faith and wanted to have his name go down in history, and it hasn't worked out quite the way he expected. So think of another time. Think of something that you want, that you've worked hard to get, you've tried and tried and tried. Maybe it looked like you were making some progress, but then all of a sudden you weren't making any progress. Could have been trying to lose some weight, could have been trying to quit smoking, could have been trying to save money, but it hasn't worked out quite the way you intended. And tell somebody about that experience. Sometime when you've been trying to get something and it just doesn't seem to work out. Maybe it works out for a little while, but then you lose all the gains you've made. What have you been trying to accomplish? What have you done? How do you feel about not getting it? Just a minute. So turn to somebody nearby and talk about that for a little bit, and then I'll ask for an example. be sure you at least think of one or two things, because I'm going to be telling you some things this evening that may actually be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes, for example, my work is to create programs, and I have some projects that I'm trying to do, but it doesn't go forward. So I needed to find different ways. So probably stop for a while and then come back, and I will realize, and sometimes I realize that this is not my project, so probably I need to switch to a different one, and was successful. So that's what probably everyone needs to ask himself. So don't go and don't spend your time for years or forever.
Right, batting your head against the brick wall. Yeah. Another example? Thank you. Well, yes. Yeah, thanks, Judy.
For the last couple of years, Lad and I have thought about and considered whether or not it was timely for us to leave the country to live somewhere else. And we have just really been sitting, watching whether or not it would come to pass, reading articles and books and doing some investigation, but it has not come to pass.
So it's something you want, and it just doesn't seem to be
Right.
the right time.
Rather, sometimes we have to admit that maybe certain things are actually indicating it's better for us to be here. But still in the back of my mind is the other idea.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? You know, we want something, and it doesn't seem to be happening, so well, maybe it's not meant to be, but in the back of the head, I still want it. So how do I know if it's not meant to be, or if there's something else going on? By the end of the evening, it may be somewhat clearer. We'll see. The question is, how is it that sometimes we can do it, and other times we can't? Is it just a matter of the fact that we have limited power? But if we have the attribute of God, that shouldn't be so much of an issue. So how do we create? We have to draw on the power of the universe. Well, that's easily said, but how do we do that? The universe is a complicated place. There's a simple structural principle that can help when it comes to bringing something into being that we really want. I learned about this principle from a man named Robert Fritz. He wrote a book called The Path of Least Resistance. It's about structure. Robert Fritz says that structure has integrity, and that structure, more than any other single factor, determines what happens in this physical universe. Structure determines what people do, much more than you might think. Consider a building. Where do people walk? They walk down the corridors. They don't try to walk through the walls. I had a friend who had a garden outside his house, and the two doors of his house were far from the garden. And day after day, week after week, he had to go to his back door and walk around and then come back around to the garden, or he had to go out his front door and walk way around to the garden, until finally, one day, he got fed up, he got his chainsaw, and he made a new door right next to the garden. And thereafter, he was easily able to get to the garden. He changed the structure. Until he changed the structure, it didn't matter how much he wanted to be there, it didn't matter what a good person he was, it didn't matter anything. As soon as he changed the structure, it was easy. So what kind of structure that's not necessarily so physical might be relevant? There is one simple structural principle that has more to do with creating, with fashioning, than any other. This is the principle. Tension, everywhere in the universe, so far as we know, even in outer space, where there's no gravity, seeks resolution. Would you like to hear that again? Tension seeks resolution. I'm not talking about psychological tension. As far as we know, this rubber thing doesn't feel bad. It doesn't feel upset. It's not tense like that. But there's a tension in the structure. And as long as there's tension in the structure, that tension seeks resolution. As soon as there's tension in the structure, it tries to resolve. The behavior of the structure will seek resolution. After there's no more tension, there's no more tendency to move. As soon as there is tension, there's tendency to move. This is true physically, but it's also true because we're spiritual beings, that we can create structures in our minds. We can create structures in our consciousness that have the same principle. Tension seeks resolution. And this, in fact, is what we do when we fashion, when we create, when we bring something into being. We begin with a vision. I don't mean ability to see. I mean a sense of what we want. Without a vision, it's said, the people perish. Anybody know where that quote came from? That's right. It came from the Bible. That's right. It came from Proverbs. Yeah. So in the Bible, it says, without vision, the people perish. Only that which can be imagined can be brought into being. Abdu'l-Baha said that. That means if you can't imagine it, you're very unlikely to end up having it. So the first step of having what you want is knowing what you want. And a lot of us, as children, gradually get taught inadvertently not to know what we want, because it doesn't seem to make any difference what we want. We're taught that we're supposed to do what our parents want us to want, or our teachers want us to want. And if we want something else, we're taught, no, you can't have that. When you're older, maybe. And maybe not even then. And a lot of people, it's sort of like if you need to go to the bathroom and then you don't for a while. After a while, then you can't anymore. When you want something and then you continually deny wanting it, don't do anything about it, don't take any action toward it, after a while, it gets to be really confusing about what you even want. I was teaching a couple of classes for Tony Ballard over at St. Pete College, and I asked the kids in that class to come up with something they wanted. And several of them had difficulty doing it. I said, if this class could change your life, what are 3 ways you'd like it changed? And several of them took a long time not writing, and I asked, you having a hard time figuring out what you want? And they said, yeah. But that's critical. So the first step, if you have let that capacity atrophy, is to spend some time thinking about, what do I want? If I could have it, what would I want? If I had a magic wand, if I had a magic genie, what would I ask for after I asked for a multitude of wishes? What would I go for? I would recommend, if you're not having as much of what you want as you want, that you get a little piece of paper or a notebook and carry it around with you, and every so often ask, what's something I want? And see what comes to you. And as you get back in the habit, you'll think of more things. But there's no tension just because you want something. So the second element of the fundamental structure that can help you create is knowing what current reality is. Current reality is your starting point. If I want to be standing here, and I am standing here, there's no tension. There's no tendency to move, right? But let's say I want to be over there. That's my vision. I want to be standing over there. And what's my current reality? I'm standing over here. Now, there's a tension. And that tension, like all tension in the universe, seeks resolution. And I may feel relief. Or I may just feel happy that I accomplished what I set out to do. It seems so simple, and it is simple. We do this 1,000 times a day in all sorts of ways. And it works nearly every time. You have an idea what you want, you notice you haven't got it, you set off in the direction of having it, you keep noticing, am I there yet? Am I there yet? Am I there yet? Ah, I'm there. You keep going until you get there, and then there's no more tension. Then you think of something else you want. We do it all the time. Works great. So why doesn't it always work? It doesn't always work because we don't always do it right. There's some things to know about using this structure. The first is, how do we get the vision part right? There are some very common mistakes that people typically make when they set out to try to have what they want, that have to do with not understanding how to create vision in a way that will actually work. One of the most common is to start out by focusing on what we don't want and trying to get rid of it. Now, there's nothing wrong with noticing that that what you have isn't what you want as a kind of a springboard to think about what you do want. But a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people just focus on what they don't want and try to keep it from happening. Anybody ever hear of the Flying Wallendas? High wire aerialist troop. They used to do things like that. They would have pyramids way up in the sky with a whole family walking the wire. They would do headstands. They would do all kinds of amazing things on the wire. I was in Puerto Rico a few years ago, and I was staying in a little motel, and in the motel there was a video display. It was kind of a macabre tourist attraction, because what it showed on that video, it showed something that happened in March of 1978. The patriarch of the family, Carl Wallenda, was walking between that building and another building. That's what he'd taken to doing. He would walk between two high buildings as a way to show off and also get people to come to the show. And as he was walking, which he had done thousands and thousands of times before, he started to run into trouble. And you could see that he was struggling. And then, as I watched the videotape, I saw something very interesting. If you notice, he looks like he might be about to fall. But what's he holding on to? Is he holding on to the wire to keep himself from falling? He's holding on to the bar. Why is he holding on to the bar? That's his balance bar. That's what, for his whole life, has meant safety. That bar is what enables him to stay balanced, right? So in this situation where he's feeling in danger, what does he go for? Safety. Just like most of us. When there's something that's not going the way we want, we grab a hold of what has always worked. But it didn't work for him. He held the bar all the way to the floor, all the way to the ground. He took a quick grab at the wire at the last minute, but it was too late with one hand, and then he went back to the bar. Now, this was not the most difficult time he had ever walked. He'd done things that were much harder than that. He'd walked across huge canyons. He'd walked across high buildings. As I said, he'd done headstands on the wire. He was incredibly skilled. And yet he fell to his death, doing an easy walk. And that's what this tourist attraction at the motel was about, was showing the video. But what was fascinating to me was that on the video, they interviewed his daughter. And they asked her, why did he fall? Why do you think it happened? He's getting a little bit old. Do you think it was that? No, of course not. He's done much more difficult things just a couple of months ago. Well, was it an unusually difficult time? Was it very windy? It's a little bit windy, but he's been in much higher winds than that. Well, why do you think he fell? She said, I know why he fell. Really? That's when I started getting really interested. She said, all his life, he has lived to walk the wire. But in the last few months, I noticed a change in my father. I didn't know what to make of it, but he suddenly became obsessed with the idea that he was going to fall. He began checking the wires to make sure that they'd been tied correctly instead of leaving it up to the family as he'd always done before. He was talking about how difficult it was going to be. He was doing everything he could to keep from falling. She said he became obsessed with falling and trying to prevent it. I'm sure that's why he fell. Always before, until that last few months, Carl Wallenda said, life is being on the wire. Everything else is just waiting. And while he was focused on walking the wire, he walked the wire like a champion. He could do anything up there. But when he decided to stop, to try to keep from falling, that's when he fell. This is a more extreme version of preventing what you don't want. That comes up in a lot of other ways in what's called problem solving. A lot of people think that's the way to go, problem solving. But there are some serious problems with problem solving. And it's very different from creating. The first is that your mind can't imagine not. Now, what did Abdu'l-Baha say? If it cannot be imagined, it cannot be created. What are you imagining when you're trying to prevent falling? Falling. Do you see that? What is someone imagining if you say, don't spill that water? If you simply say, keep the glass level, the person is much more likely to make it across the room. Yeah. Your mind can't imagine not. You can't do that. So if you want to have what you want, that's not the same as trying not to have what you don't want. You could start with what you don't want, but you got to go, okay, if I got rid of that, what is it that I would want? Second, your motivation goes away as you begin to make progress. A lot of people try to motivate their children or other people by building up a lot of emotional conflict about something. And some people try to lose weight that way. They feel really lousy about how fat they are. Right? So, I'm so fat, oh my God, I weigh so much. So then they go on a diet and begin losing weight. And the scale is not showing so bad, and they stop feeling so bad. So pretty soon, they don't have as much motivation to do anything about it, and pretty soon, they haven't lost very much weight. Anybody relate? This is the most important thing that's wrong with problem solving, however, aside from the fact that you may actually create what you don't want by trying to avoid it. When the problem is solved, you still don't have what you really want. Here's what I mean. Consider the current medical system, which is about getting rid of symptoms. If you get rid of symptoms, once you've gotten rid of symptoms, you still have not created health. See the difference? The problem with problem solving is that if you're trying to get rid of something, you don't end up with anything but nothing. You end up without it, but you don't end up with something. And the easiest way to get rid of something is to kill something or destroy something or wreck something or break something. So this is one of the major reasons that people are so dysfunctional in their relationships with each other and with other countries. I mean, think about it. If we don't like the terrorists and we don't like what they're doing, what do we try to do? Go kill them. It makes sense if you're just trying to get rid of it. But if you're thinking about what kind of world would you want if there were no terrorists that would lead them not to want to be terrorists either, you take a very different kind of action. So the question is not, what am I trying to get rid of? Which will tend to lead you into a very limited way of thinking that involves trying to stamp it out. But rather, what do I actually want? What do I want to bring into existence? What do I want to bring into being? Which means vision, which means imagining it. Okay, so creating is bringing into being what you do want. If you get nothing else out of tonight but that, this will take you a long way. Asking yourself, what do I really want here? Not what I want. Not what do I want to have stop. You're arguing with your mate. You want that person to stop. Tell them to shut up. Is that what you want? A shut up mate? At the moment, it feels like it, but probably not. Probably there's something quite else in the nature of the relationship that you want. Remember, I say be, and it is. Thou shalt say be, and it shall be. I don't say don't be, and it isn't. Comparison is also not vision, not real vision. So if you say, my vision is to be better than I was yesterday, or to have my sister better, or to be better than my sister, or to be better, to have our country better than that country, or bigger, faster, or smarter. I want more than I've got now. See, you can't imagine exactly what more is. In fact, it's addictive. If what you tell yourself you want is more, then when you get some, what do you want? More. So when you get that, what do you want? More. And that's what the advertisers would have us do. It keeps the economy growing, but it never leads to happiness. The question is, what's enough? So you have to think about, what is it that you really want? What would be the amount that you really want? Because up to a certain point, there's a curve of happiness. You know, when you don't have anything of something, like food, you generally want more. And you want a little more than that. But at a certain point, you get to a place where getting more doesn't lead to as much greater satisfaction as it did before. And then you get to a point where getting still more, on this axis is more, it tends to be less satisfying. You're feeling stuffed. Or you've got so much stuff in your house, you got no place to put it. And then you got even more stuff, and there's even less satisfaction because you got to keep somebody from stealing it. And so there's a curve that goes up, and then it goes down again as you get more and more. What's at the top of that curve? It's called enough. So vision is not about presenting what you don't want. It's not about comparing with what you've got. There's something that you actually want to bring into being, and you know what that is. It's also not just about what's possible. This is one of the major ways that people interfere with their own ability to create what they want. Because if you have a vision of what you want, but somebody tells you, be realistic. You can't have everything you want. A person like you especially, you can't expect to be able to get that. What's happening to the tension? The tension's going away, isn't it? For 7 years, nobody had been able to run a mile any faster than 4 minutes and 1 second and some fraction. And people had begun to be talking about that maybe the 4-minute mile was just plain physically impossible. Some people were saying the human body just can't metabolize waste products as fast as that. If somebody did run as fast as a 4-minute mile, they'd die. Dr. Roger Bannister in England said, well, if I die, I die. I'm going to do it. He said, not, I want to run faster than I ran last time. He said, I want to run a 4-minute mile. And he did some unusual kinds of training that people criticized him for. Didn't do nearly as many miles as people tended to do at the time. And he had some other ways of building up to it. He developed an unusual way of doing it. And on May 6, 1954, he ran a mile in 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds. And collapsed, but lived. 46 days later, his arch rival in Australia, Landy, ran faster than that. And it wasn't very long before half a dozen people had run a mile in under 4 minutes. Do you suppose some of them might have been capable of doing it before? Probably. Why didn't they? They weren't trying to. They set a vision of 4 minutes and half a second. Or 4 minutes and 75 hundredths of a second. They didn't set 4 minutes because they thought it was impossible. And if you think something impossible, so you don't go for it because you think it's impossible, that's what you're doing too. Yeah, Henry Ford said, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So vision is not just about what's possible. Vision is about what you actually want. He did not know he could not fly, so he flew. So it's not about preventing what you don't want. It's not about a comparison. It's not about just what's possible. Vision The kind of vision that will enable you to fill your life with what you really want is about trying for what you really want, going for what you really want. It's hard to invest your life spirit in a compromise. The fellow that I learned about this, much of this from, Robert Fritz, said that. Steve Jobs said something else. Just don't live somebody else's life. Take a moment and think about the ways in which you might have done that at some point in your life. Somebody said, well, you ought to want this. Well, this is what's available to you. Well, this is what you'd be really good at. Well, this is what you should do. Don't do that, do this. And so all of a sudden, you're not living your own life. So vision is about living your own life full on. How do we get current reality right? You'll notice, by the way, that sign is full of bullet holes. Current reality is easy if you sidestep a couple of obvious pitfalls. The first pitfall is saying that reality is worse than it is. Your criticism blew me away. It destroyed me. And this is what I picture. There you are, being blown away. But probably it wasn't quite that bad. On the other hand, it's also not saying it's better than it is. If you're in a disaster zone like that, and the note you write home says, everything's fine, wish you were here, that's not a very accurate description of your current reality. And to have the tension, you got to know what your starting point really is. Okay? So it's not worse than it is, it's not better than it is, it's like the three bears. It's saying exactly what it is. Good, bad, or indifferent. Usually some of each. And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Also came from the Bible. That's why Baha'u'llah said that telling the truth is probably the most important single thing that human beings can do. That's why lying is the worst sin. Imagine that. Worse than killing people or anything else. Lying. Why? Because without the foundation of truth, you can't have the truth about what you really want. You can't have the truth about what you've really got, what your real starting point is. You're nowhere. You're lost. So creating what you genuinely want depends on telling yourself the truth about what you want and telling yourself the truth about your starting point. By the way, it's not negative thinking to say things are not perfect. There was a study done of some of the most successful CEOs, leaders of major corporations. And what they found about these people who were most successful, looking for commonalities, was there were not very many things that they had in common, actually. There were very different kinds of people in many ways. But there were two things they had in common that were interesting. First of all, they're pretty positive people, in the sense that when other people would see just a mess, they would see opportunities. And they would put a lot of energy into making those opportunities real. They used this structure a lot. The second thing they all had in common, however, was that they always made contingency plans. They always thought about what's the worst thing that could happen that looks at all realistic given what we have going on, and they planned how they would deal with it. It's not negative thinking to notice that there are some forces moving in an opposite direction from where you want to go. It's intelligent. What makes it negative thinking is if you live there, if you focus only on that negative stuff, rather than noticing it and focusing on where you want to go. You need the whole structure. You need what you want, you need what the current reality is, and the parts of current reality that are positive and negative and neutral. So how do we get current reality right? Not better or worse than it is, exactly the way it is. And one more thing, you got to keep checking, because reality changes. The thing is, current reality, it's not that current reality doesn't want you to have it. It's not that current reality is against you having what you want. It's just that current reality is the resultant of all the forces so far. You know, it's sort of like, if this is where reality is, if you ever went to science class and they had those triangles of forces and so forth, it's like all the forces in play added up to this. Well, if you come along wanting something else, you add a different force. And it's fairly likely that things are going to move in the direction that you want them to move in. I'll show you that in a minute in a different way. So what do we got here? We got structural tension. It says we start with vision. We add current reality. If there's a discrepancy between current reality and your vision, there's a tension created which seeks resolution. Test question. If my vision is here, current reality is here, got some nice tension going, what's the easiest way to resolve the tension? Huh? Let go. That's right. Much easier than trying to have anything happen, right? So what's it easy to let go of? That's what happened to your dreams. Don't make yourself miserable wanting stuff you can't have. Don't go for things that'll make other people uncomfortable. You got no vision, you end up with what you got. But you can also let go of current reality. These are the idle dreamers that make true visionaries grind their teeth. Saying, everything's fine, everything's wonderful. We live in the best of all possible worlds. Maybe we do, but if it's not the way you want it, there's no tension to get you there. Or people who lie about current reality by making it worse than it is. It's so awful, there's no hope, there's no reason to even try. That's kind of another way of giving up on your vision. Okay? If you don't give up on your vision, if you keep your vision and you keep current reality, even if the vision is impossible, by the way, even if it's physically impossible, if you lower it to what you think is possible, notice how it reduces the tension. Say it really is impossible. You're at least going to get as close as you could, right? But if you lower it at all, you won't. And usually what happens is that people who go after something that other people say is impossible end up getting far more than even they thought was possible. If you don't let go, what's the only thing that can happen? You're not changing your vision. Reality's changing all the time. What has to happen? Reality has to move toward your vision, doesn't it? That's the only thing that can happen. There's a tension in the universe that you've created that will tend to move toward having what you want. And the first thing that will happen is you'll think of things. You want to have more good ideas? This is one of the quickest ways to have good creative ideas, like how to solve those problems, is you think about what you want and you notice what you've got and you notice it's not the same. And then you forget about it for a while. And while you're taking a shower or driving, you have an idea. Or you wake up in the middle of the night with an idea. How many people have had that happen? All of us. Yeah, that's how you have ideas. See, the first way this tension resolves is by having ideas about things you could do. Now, can it happen automatically? Well, yeah, it can sometimes. I want to tell you about an experience that I had just because I can't explain it, and I thought you might be interested. I had a vision at one time. I was a therapist in private practice, seeing people one-on-one, and previously I had given lectures and done things with large groups, and I really enjoyed them, but I wasn't doing it at that time, and I thought I'd really like to do that. And I was taking a course from Robert Fritz, actually, and I was using these creative principles to imagine myself in front of a room of people, kind of like this, talking to people. And I didn't take any action to do anything about it, but I was visualizing that for a couple of weeks and noticing that I didn't have it for a couple of weeks. And I got a telephone call from a friend of mine who had moved to California a couple of years before. And he said, I was just thinking about you. I was reading the Wall Street Journal, and I noticed there's an ad for a corporate training company that's looking for people, and I just thought you might be interested. So I went into the corporate training company, and I bought a tie. At that time, I didn't own one. And I got hired, and I learned how to give speeches like this and to work with corporate executives and such like. And that wouldn't be all that unusual, except that in the time that guy had lived in California after moving from there, he had never contacted me in any way, nor has he ever since. That was like 15 years ago. How many of you have had an experience like that, where you wanted something and something kind of miraculous happened? Raise your hand high. Just look around the room. Raise your hand high. Look around the room. It's not that unusual, folks. Something happens when you create this kind of structure in your consciousness. And I don't know how it works, but I am now convinced that it creates a structural change in the universe, and the universe begins to move in that direction. Yeah.
The question. Sometimes when we have a vision, when we have a dream, or want something, you expect to get it pretty soon. Yes. Where is the border? How much time do you need to wait for realizing this dream, or you need to, forget about it, or still wait? Because in my experience, for example, I had one dream, and it took more than 5 years to achieve this result.
Yeah.
So I could, stop in 1 year. I didn't do that. What do you think about it?
What I think about it is that the answer is you need to tell the truth. And in this case, the truth about how important is that vision to you. It's not a matter of how long it takes to get there. It's a matter of how important is it to you to get there.
But sometimes you need to know, because if you think about something, right, you spend your time, your energy on it, so this is the spare your energy. So you need to stop and think differently, right?
Maybe.
What do you think is right decision?
This is actually a perfect lead-in to what I'm going to talk about next. Okay, so I'll answer your question, but not directly, and I'll come back to it. Okay, because sometimes this works. Sometimes it works miraculously, like when the person called me from California. Sometimes it works in a very straightforward way. I came across a poster like this that was actually on the wall at a convent where I was doing some lecturing one time. And I saw a poster kind of like this. It said, "Trust in God, but keep paddling." So it may happen by magic. There is this thing about the secret and sending out vibes and all that kind of stuff. But it also helps to take some real action in the real universe. And sometimes you get things a lot faster that way. So I'm not recommending that you depend on magic. I am recommending that you create that structure and do what makes sense. Now, what makes sense gets back to what you were talking about. What if you keep paddling and paddling and paddling and you're not getting anywhere? Well, there are several possibilities, so there's no one easy answer. And you can see if one of these seems like it makes sense, okay? First of all, if you're getting nowhere and you seem to be lost in the fog, it may be that it's just time delay. Imagine that you were down in a valley and there were some people at the top of a cliff, and there was a large meadow at the top of the cliff. And up on the top of the cliff, there are some people who are rolling an enormous rock. And it's an enormous rock they're trying to roll over to the edge. Okay? From down here, you're looking up, you don't see anything happening. And they're rolling, and rolling, and rolling, and rolling, and rolling. And days go by, weeks go by, years go by. You see any sign of progress? All of a sudden, one day, boom! Okay? That's what I'm talking about, time delay. Sometimes you're taking whatever actions you can, the universe is doing what it's doing, and it's heading in your direction, but you may die of old age before it gets to what you want. This could happen. That doesn't mean it's not happening, but it means it's not, okay? So that's one possibility. Yeah.
People voted trying to have a more just society in terms of opportunities for people, and people live to see it, but still the society moving towards its vision.
Yeah, by the way, the I Have a Dream speech, one of the reasons that that's one of the most famous speeches in human history is because if you look at the speech, it's structured according to structural tension. He lays out the vision that will rise up and live out the true meaning of America's creed, that all men are created equal. And he lays out current reality. America has defaulted on that dream insofar as its citizens of color are concerned. He lays it out really strong, and he leaves it there. It's part of why that speech is so powerful. It's structural tension, exactly. Yeah.
Now, how do you distinguish between visions and like wishful thinking, daydreaming? I mean, is there a way to exercise in finding a true vision, or all visions are pretty much good visions?
That's probably one of the most important questions that we'll talk about tonight, and I'm going to talk about it last. Yeah. Sometimes it's a plateau. Anybody who's ever developed a skill of any kind knows what I'm talking about here. Physical skill, learning to play a sport or a musical instrument or anything like that. When you first start to play a musical instrument, let's say the clarinet, you pick up the clarinet and you learn how to make a little sort of a squawk, and then pretty soon you can make little tunes. And you got a lot of progress right away. And then you hit a plateau. And you practice and practice and practice and practice. It doesn't seem like you're getting anywhere. In fact, it seems like you're getting worse because your ear's getting better and you can tell how lousy you sound, which at the beginning you couldn't. And then what's happening is you're trying all kinds of little experiments and your nervous system is learning, but it hasn't learned enough yet to make use of it. And then all of a sudden, one day, your nervous system can reintegrate with the results of the experiments you've done, and you have a burst forward in your ability. Suddenly, you're a whole lot better than you were the day or two before. And just when you're really thinking, okay, now I'm really rolling, you hit another plateau. And you practice and practice and practice and practice and practice until you are ready for another breakthrough, at which point how many people have experienced that? Okay, so you know that well. Well, that happens when you're creating other stuff too. You got to learn how to create it. And the universe has to learn how to help you. And the main thing I can say about that period of time is do a lot of experiments. Because experiments give you a chance to learn. Don't get stuck on one way of trying and keep trying it that way. Try a lot of experiments, and then whatever seems to be working, do more of that. The other possibility, however, is that it's a different structure, that it's another structure besides structural tension. And this is the other most common reason that we end up not having what we want. Say you have a vision, and you know what current reality is, and you're accurate about both of them. And so that creates a tension that seeks resolution. But imagine that you have another vision, and you're accurate about the current reality. So that creates a tension which seeks resolution. But say the 2 points of resolution just happen to be mutually exclusive with the visions that you wanted. I know that's a little bit complicated, so I want to give you an example. Bill, would you give me a hand? And Lad, would you give me a hand? Imagine that I want to lose. I have an ideal weight, okay? And let's imagine that I'm really fat. Okay, so you're going to be over here, okay? And as I get fatter, you say, diet, diet, diet. Or you say, exercise, 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 okay? So now, the problem is, I also get hungry, okay? So, as I get hungry, I want as I get hungry, I want you to say eat. Eat, okay?
Eat more.
Okay. Okay. So
Eat less.
I'm coming.
Portion control. Exercise more.
Eat that food.
Wow, I've eaten.
Absolutely no desserts.
Come on, you need to eat. You
No,
know
I've eaten. But he's telling me to exercise.
Oh, exercise.
So now I'm going to exercise. I'm going to exercise, and I'm exercising. I'm dieting.
It will hurt you if you exercise.
Pain. You're doing great.
A lot of pain. It's going to be just muscles. Your muscles can't take it.
Louder.
Well, struggle now. Come on. What is this?
Exercise.
No, you.
Okay. Exercise.
That's not you. This is you. This is the real you.
Down.
Okay, let's try another. Same structure. Stay there. Okay, same structure. So I've decided that I want to save some money. Okay, I'm going to save some money. So you're saying if I start spending money, you got to tell me yeah, I really need to save that money.
Need it for the future.
Okay.
Need that money.
But there's
Save.
all these wonderful things I want to buy.
No, save that money. Save that money.
Yeah,
You need
I got to
to
save it. Got to save it.
You gotta let it go around if you want it to come back.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. That's true. That's true. That's true. That's true.
You're not going to have enough for retirement. Get back here.
Tell me about the iPad.
Save.
Tell me about the iPad. Tell me about something great to buy.
Oh, look at that new car. Mercedes.
Oh, the taxes on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Have any of you experienced that? Only every day, right? Okay, so here's the thing, tension resolution system is fine, but we got more than one. And what about when they're incompatible? What about when satisfying one tension builds the other tension? That's called structural conflict. It's still built into the structure. And like all structure, the structure determines my behavior. Notice when this tension got to be more, I went this way. When this tension got to be more, then I went this way. And when this tension got to be more, I went this way again. But my behavior is determined by the structure. And the structure is determined by the tension resolution systems. Now, structural conflict always produces oscillation. Back and forth and back and forth. It's like a rocking chair. In fact, anytime you see this kind of oscillation, where you go one way, and then you go the other way, and then you go one way, and then you go the other way, or anybody else does, or your company does, you centralize, and then you decentralize, and then you centralize, and then you decentralize, or you cost cut until you can't get any products, so then you put a lot of money into new products, and then you kind of got to cost cut again. Anytime you see oscillation, you got structural conflict. Here's the thing. Structural conflict is not a problem that you can solve. You can't make it go away because it's built into the structure. Some relationships are just not meant to be. They each are saying, I love you, but one is a pin and one is a balloon. Does this mean that we're doomed? You would be I'd not be surprised if you thought so. It says, 100% people are sure we're doomed. I've never seen consumer confidence higher. They're really confident that we're doomed. So does structural conflict mean we can't create what we want? Are we doomed? Actually, there's a hint. Here's the hint. Structural conflict creates oscillation. It's like a rocking chair. A lot of movement, but you don't get anywhere. And if you look at it, those two tension resolution systems. You get back this way, there's more tension this way. So, here's the hint. Structural tension produces advancement. With structural tension, you get somewhere. So, how can we ever get anywhere when there's structural conflict at play? We can't solve it. It's not a problem that we can solve. But we can create a senior structure that runs off structural tension, a structure in which structural tension predominates. Here's what that looks like schematically. Say you got a vision of health. Say you've got the kind of conflict about diet that I just acted out here. So the whole thing is going on here. I want to eat, but I want to diet, and if I diet or if I exercise, then I get more hungry, and it goes around and around. That's just part of current reality. That's part of current reality they got to deal with somehow. I still want what I want. If I make the structural tension, the senior structure that includes this, then it's possible that it can resolve. In fact, it will naturally tend to resolve. Maybe I'll find some other kind of food to eat or a new way of eating. Maybe I'm eating smaller meals more often so I don't get hungry. Or I decide that I will allow myself to be uncomfortable until my stomach shrinks, and then I won't be as uncomfortable. There's an infinite number of ways it can resolve once I just take this as part of the deal. If that seems kind of abstract, a picture's sometimes worth 1,000 words. If this is the overall structure, the structural tension, I can still have the rocking chair inside the airplane, and I can go wherever I want to go, rocking back and forth while I go there. Does that make sense? Okay. What makes this possible is another amazing capacity that we have, another spiritual capacity. It's the power of choice. And specifically, there are two kinds of choices, and most people don't use them well. A primary choice is something you know you want. I want a job. A secondary choice is a step that will take you toward the primary choice. And people frequently do not own their secondary choices. I want a job, but I have to go to work. Do I have to go to work? It's part of the deal. Now, if you are insistent on only doing stuff you feel like doing, you're very unlikely to end up with very much of what you want. Because you won't do anything, no matter of a secondary choice, that you don't want in and of itself. And this is where a lot of people fall down. Amateurs, or dilettantes, I should say, dilettantes only play beautiful music when they feel like it. Otherwise, they don't show up. Professionals play beautiful music whether they feel like it or not. That's what makes them professionals. Amateurs can be either way. It's interesting. An amateur can be so dedicated to the music that he'll play whether he feels good or not, or he may be more like a dilettante. But if you own your secondary choices, if you say, yes, I want to go to work even though I don't feel like it because it enables me to have this job and do the things that I want as a result, then you've got that large-scale structural tension. Then you're on the jet plane, and if you happen to not feel like it one day, that's just the rocking chair while you're on the jet plane. You see what I'm talking about? Does this make sense? So one of the things you want to do on the way to finding out how to create what you want is think about what are the steps that will lead you there? What are the secondary choices that you need to make? And what's cool about this is that it's not about willpower. Abdu'l-Baha says we must sacrifice the important for the most important. It's about being clear, telling yourself the truth about what's really important to you. So, for example, is it more important to me to accomplish this thing that I don't seem to be getting there yet, but I do feel like I'm making a little bit of progress, even though it looks at the moment as though it's going to take 15 years? Is it more important to me to get there? Or is it more important to me to keep my options open and go for something that's likely to give me a quicker payoff? Only I can know. And either way, it's fine. But it's a matter of being truthful about what I actually consider most important. Do you see that? There's no outside answer. No one can answer that for you. It's about the truth of what your spirit says you really care about. It's not about willpower. All the way to heaven is heaven. It's one of the most wonderful things I ever heard. A mystic in the 14th century, Catherine of Siena, said that. If you're on your way to heaven, every step is heaven. If you're aware that this step is taking you to heaven. Practicing for a true lover of music is not drudgery. Somebody asked Pablo Casals, the greatest cellist the world's probably ever seen, why he practiced hours and hours and hours a day when he was in his 90s. You know what he said? He said, I think I detect improvement. And he loved that improvement so much that of course he played. All the way to heaven is heaven. And what makes it heaven, the real secret of creating what you truly want, O Son of Man, I love thy creation, hence I created thee. Wherefore do thou love me, that I may name thy name and fill thy soul with the spirit of life. What's the secret again? I'll cut it down a little. I loved thy creation, hence I created thee. Our model is the reason God created us, the reason God created all of this. He didn't have to. It wasn't going to do anything for him. Why did he do it? Once again, the secret is love. To tap into this power, this attribute of God, we need to be like God. And that means we don't create things because it'll do something for us or because it'll make us feel better or any of that stuff. We do it because we love something so much that we want it to exist. What do you love enough to do whatever it takes to make sure that it exists and thrives? Those of you who have children, you know what I'm talking about. This is what you do with your kids. They may be sick, they need you, you don't feel like it, you're there anyway. Why? Because you love them. You want them to thrive, to do well, so it'll be a good reflection on you? That'd be nice. But no, because you really want them to be happy because you love them. And some days you don't feel that way. And some days you're not such a good parent. But some days you are. What matters is the spirit when you create. There's a wonderful book called The Art Spirit by Henri, in which he talks about how every work of creation, he's talking about artists like painting and so forth, but it applies everywhere. Every work of creation includes in it physically the vibration, the spirit of the artist at the moment when it was created. This is why forgeries don't work. A forger can get all the brush strokes in the right place, but he doesn't have the consciousness that the artist had at that moment. And so it's not a masterpiece. It's not, at the end of the day, what we do in the physical universe that brings our creations to life. It's the spirit of love flowing through us into manifestation that fills our world with life. There's a secret about how to do that I learned not in a holy scripture, but on the wall of a crab shack in Huntington Beach, California. I saw this sign. When you do that, when you tell yourself the truth about what you really want, what you really love, what you love most, and you tell yourself the truth about your starting point, and you tell yourself the truth about what matters more than what else, what you really love, then you want what you want, and you can start with nothing. And remarkably quickly, you have something. But it doesn't stop there. Because when your spirit is filled with love of what you're trying to create, there's a whole new kind of color in your life that you can't get any other way. I ask for you the supreme blessing that you may be so filled with the vitality of the Heavenly Spirit that you may be the cause of life to the world. He said that, and I say that to you. Thank you so much for being here.